Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving into something really fundamental. The architecture of belief itself. We're looking at this huge tension in the modern world, this kind of chasm between, let's say, strong religious conviction on one side
Right.
and equally strong atheistic rejection on the other.
Yeah, that binary.
Exactly. And the really fascinating idea that maybe a third perspective is emerging, something that synthesizes both, maybe, without getting locked into the dogma of either.
That's the core idea we're exploring.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to give you a kind of shortcut to understanding this shift. We'll look at the ancient roots, why belief systems even started, analyze why maybe staunch faith and staunch skepticism can sometimes look like two sides of the same coin, the coin of certainty.
That's a key point, the certainty aspect.
And then distill what this new post-dogmatic way of thinking actually looks like in practice.
And, this whole journey really starts with a bit of intellectual humility. I mean, the sources we looked at really highlight how the certainty you might find in some fundamentalist religions.
Well, it can sound surprisingly similar to the certainty of militant evangelical atheism.
Both claiming to have the answer.
Exactly. Both can be quite closed off to genuine curiosity, in a way. They're positions of conviction, like you said.
Right.
And this third perspective we're talking about really hinges on admitting the limits of our own minds. It suggests that maybe embracing not knowing, honestly saying, I don't have the final answer, that could actually be the foundation for respect, for real dialogue.
That changes the whole tone, doesn't it? From a fight to, a conversation. But okay, to get why this shift might be happening now, we need to go back. Way back. Let's start with the why. When did humans first become, spiritual beings?
It's a great question, but the answer is complex. It wasn't like flipping a switch, it was gradual, organic.
Yeah.
We can trace what you might call proto-religion back, an astonishingly long way. How far? Are we talking early Homo sapiens or?
Even earlier, we're seeing evidence of something like spiritual thinking, a sense of more with our relatives, the Neanderthals.
Really? Neanderthal?
Yeah. The sources suggest practices dating back somewhere between, say, 100,000 and 50,000 years ago.
Wow. And how do we know? What's the evidence?
It's mostly inferred from burials, how they buried their dead. They didn't just cover them up. We find bodies placed with objects, tools, sometimes even traces of flowers, ochre, things like that. And that strongly suggests, some kind of belief in an afterlife, or at least a transition, giving them supplies for a journey.
The first hint of spiritual care. That's incredible.
It really is. The earliest operating system, like you hinted.
Okay, so that's Neanderthals. When do we see our lineage, Homo sapiens, starting to formalize things more?
Well, the evidence gets richer there, especially with art. Think about cave paintings.
Let's go. Out the mute.
Exactly, let's go. Around 17,000 BCE, give or take. Those amazing images, the hybrid human-animal figures, they point pretty strongly toward shamanistic beliefs, the idea of spirit worlds, guides crossing boundaries.
Right, connecting with something beyond the visible.
But these were still localized, often shaman-led practices. The big shift, the institutionalization, organized religion, dogma, priests, temples, that comes much later.
And that lines up with agriculture, doesn't it?
Precisely. It emerges right alongside the first big agricultural civilizations. Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, around 3000 to 2000 BCE. And it's not really a coincidence. Religion became almost essential for managing these new, large, complex societies.
Okay, so that brings us to function. It wasn't just like a cultural extra. It was doing real work.
Oh, absolutely. You could say it served maybe 4 key needs for survival and thriving back then.
Let's break those down. What's the first one?
First, the explanatory need. Simple as that. Before physics, before meteorology, religion gave you a coherent story about the world. It answered the big, scary questions. Why does the sun rise? Why do floods happen? It gave you an answer, even if it was supernatural.
Yeah, it provides certainty in the face of the unknown.
Okay, which leads to comfort, I guess.
Definitely. The psychological need. Life was tough, often short, unpredictable. Religion offered huge comfort against suffering and, crucially, hope against death, the promise of an afterlife. And rituals, prayers for rain, ceremonies for harvests, they gave people a sense of shared control, even if just perceived control in a chaotic world.
Right, doing something together, and then it scales up. From personal comfort to group organization.
Yes, the sociological need. This might be its most vital evolutionary role, actually. Religion created shared identity. It was like cultural glue. It fostered cooperation, which you absolutely need for big communities. And concepts like watchful gods, well, that basically outsourced moral policing. kept people in line through an invisible authority. That makes sense for stability, but it also explains why dogma can become so rigid later on.
That's just really sharp insight, yes.
If the rules come from an unchanging God, changing the rules looks like heresy.
Absolutely. The stability required for early societies becomes the inflexibility that clashes with later innovations, like science.
Yeah.
That rigidity is exactly what this third perspective tries to navigate.
Got it. And the last need, the big one.
The existential need, meaning purpose. Religion answered the why are we here question. It put humanity into a grand narrative, a divine story, gave life meaning beyond just, sowing and reaping.
Yeah.
And that need hasn't vanished.
No, definitely not. Okay, so fast forward. We've got this incredibly complex belief architecture built over millennia, and now it's colliding head-on with rationalism, with science, leading to this polarized binary debate we see everywhere. And as we said, both traditional sides, deep belief, and sort of assertive atheism, they're both stances of conviction.
They really are. Faith in presence, faith in absence. Both often claim a level of certainty that can, frankly, shut down genuine inquiry. This third perspective asks, what if the most honest position isn't certainty, but acknowledging the mystery?
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for today, because this group, this third way, it's apparently huge and growing, but it doesn't fit neatly into one box. What are we calling this movement away from the binary? What are the labels?
Well, the broadest term, demographically speaking, is the religious knowns. These are the people checking none on surveys about religious affiliation. And this isn't some fringe thing, it's massive.
Yeah, the numbers are startling.
Globally, that group grew something like 17% just between 2010 and 2020. In the US, it's up to, 26-28% of adults now? It's a major shift.
A huge chunk of the population. And within that none category, you hear the phrase spiritual but not religious a lot.
Correct. SBNR. That's a very common self-identifier. These folks often reject organized dogma, the institutions, but they actively embrace personal spiritual experience, wonder, practice, maybe meditation or yoga or feeling connected to nature. It's personal.
Less about community roles, more about individual search.
Okay.
And then there are more philosophical terms, like agnosticism.
Right, but we need to understand agnosticism in its deeper sense, not just, the Greek root, agnostos, means unknowable. So it's the philosophical position that the ultimate nature of reality, or God, is fundamentally unknowable by the human mind.
Ah, so it's a statement about knowledge itself, not just belief.
Exactly. It's a position on the limits of human knowing. It's actually a pretty rigorous stance.
That makes it sound less like sitting on the fence and more like intellectual honesty.
Precisely. And then, maybe quieter, you have apatheism.
Apatheism. Okay, what's that?
It's basically the view that the whole question of God's existence, it's just not really relevant to living a good life day to day. It's not hostile or argumentative like some atheism. It just prioritizes, practical ethics and well-being over settling metaphysical debates.
Sort of a practical indifference to the ultimate questions.
In a way, yes. So if we need an umbrella term for this whole synthesis, this third way that tries to hold on to the value from both tradition and skepticism.
Yeah, what are the sources leaning towards?
Well, two strong candidates seem to be post-dogmatic spirituality or maybe metamodern spirituality.
Post-dogmatic, okay, that's clear beyond fixed rules. What about metamodern?
Metamodern is useful because it implies a conscious integration. It's taking the best of modern rationality and the sense of meaning or depth from pre-modern faith and trying to weave them together.
So it's not just going back, and it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater either. It's trying to transcend and include.
Exactly. A synthesis. Consciously choosing to value both critical thinking and personal felt meaning.
Okay, that clarifies the what. Now the how. If this group doesn't rely on dogma, how does it function? What are its principles, its rules of engagement, so to speak?
Right, because it's defined less by what you believe and more by how you hold your beliefs or your non-beliefs. It seems to be inquiry-based, experiential. The core shift, like we said, is moving away from needing absolute certainty, embracing the mystery. We could probably boil it down to 5 key principles that seem common.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, and this is foundational, humility over certainty. Just acknowledging the limits of what we can know, accepting I don't know as an honest, valid stance on ultimate questions.
That immediately dials down the arrogance, doesn't it? The root of so much conflict.
It really does. So instead of demanding proof or faith, you start from a shared place of, wow, this universe is big and mysterious.
Right. Okay, number 2.
Experience over doctrine. The focus shifts. It's less about sticking to a written creed and more about prioritizing your own direct personal experiences. Awe, love, connection, mystery, whatever feels profound to you.
So the question changes from what creed do you follow to maybe what experiences have felt sacred or deeply meaningful to you.
That's it, exactly. Validation comes from within or through shared experience, not just from a book. Third, how do they handle old stories, myths, scriptures? Through metaphor over literalism. They read these ancient texts not as literal science or history, but as powerful metaphors, psychological maps for the human journey. So you can appreciate the wisdom in a creation story, the ethical points, the insights into human nature without needing it to be a scientific account. It resolves that conflict.
That's huge. It lets people value their heritage without having to suspend disbelief entirely. It de-escalates the culture war around science and religion.
It creates a lot of breathing room. Fourth principle relates to judging beliefs. Ethics over orthodoxy. Meaning you judge a belief system, yours or someone else's, by its fruits, by the actual ethical behavior it produces. Compassion, kindness, justice, taking care of the planet.
Rather than whether someone follows the doctrine perfectly.
Exactly. Does it make people better, more compassionate humans? That's the test. It's pragmatic. Is this way of thinking actually helpful for living well together?
Okay, very practical. And number 5.
Dialogue over debate. When you talk to someone with different views, the goal isn't to win, to convert them, to prove them wrong. It's to understand, to find the shared human need underneath the different expressions. We're all grappling with meaning, community, mortality. Focus on that common ground.
Okay, those 5 principles, humility, experience, metaphor, ethics, dialogue, they paint a pretty clear picture. So let's connect this back to the big picture. If this post-dogmatic way of thinking keeps growing, becomes more mainstream, what does that mean for society? Can it actually help foster peace?
I think the potential is definitely there, yes.
Yeah.
The main way it helped is by radically lowering the stakes of disagreement.
How so?
Well, first it de-escalates things. It reframes conflicts. It's not my truth versus your falsehood anymore, which is zero-sum. It becomes more like acknowledging different, potentially valid human ways of responding to the great mystery of existence.
So a believer could maybe see an atheist's dedication to scientific truth as its own kind of reverence for reality.
Precisely. And the non-believer could appreciate the function or the beauty of faith traditions, even without sharing the specific beliefs.
Okay, finding common ground.
Yeah, the shared ground becomes those universal values. Wonder, compassion, the search for truth itself. Think about standing under a clear night sky, a believer and a non-believer side by side. One might feel God's presence, the other might feel the immense, maybe terrifying majesty of the cosmos.
But the feeling, the awe, the smallness, it's the same.
Exactly. The labels they use for the source of that feeling become less important than the shared human experience of transcendence, of humility.
Shared awe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how that would neutralize a lot of the hostility. If you realize the person standing next to you is asking the same fundamental questions about life and death, even if they reach different conclusions, it's harder to demonize them.
That's the heart of it. When you don't feel that internal need to prove the other side wrong, to defend your identity by attacking theirs, your own heart softens. You can appreciate the beauty in a hymn and the elegance in a scientific theory without feeling threatened. You see the shared human search in both.
So what we've really distilled here is a kind of transcendent synthesis. A new way of holding belief, maybe. Built more on curiosity than on fear. It allows the needs of the heart and the rigor of the mind to coexist, maybe even enrich each other, both in one person and in society.
And it's crucial as we wrap up to remember this isn't just theory. The demographics confirm it. The nons, the religiously unaffiliated, are growing fast. They're becoming a major social force globally. This shift away from binary thinking is happening, which leads to a really big question, something for you, the listener, to chew on. As this group grows, maybe even becomes dominant in some places, what new responsibilities fall on them? What new ethical and social obligations arise for this, let's call it agnostic spirituality block? If traditional religion has less central authority to tackle global challenges like poverty or climate change, what does this more decentralized, post-dogmatic spiritual landscape mean for how we, as a species, solve our biggest problems together?
That is quite the question to end on. What takes the place of that old organizing principle?
Exactly. What does collective action look like in a post-dogmatic world?
That's the challenge for the next generation, really.